Let people, let people hop on. Okay, welcome everyone. Good evening. Happy Brain Week. My name is Miranda Phelps McGuire. I work for Public Health, Madison and Dane County, and I am a member of the Dane County Prevention Alliance, who is bringing you this talk tonight. Without further ado, I will hand it over to our host, Dr. Andrew Lokuta, and I'll be monitoring the chat, and I'll let Drew take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. So good evening and welcome to everyone. I would like to make some introductions of three people. Myself, I am an instructor of human physiology at UW-Madison, and I am very pleased to have these two undergraduate students with us. They represent the best that UW-Madison has to offer. They are the embodiment of our Wisconsin idea. So again, I'm Drew. I also have a split personality tonight. I'm also a parent. So Kai, if you would introduce yourself, tell us your year in school, what your major is, and what are some goals.
Hi, I'm Kyanna. I'm the narrator tonight. I'm a junior and I'm double majoring in kinesiology and music performance, and I really want to go into physical therapy for musicians and do research in biomechanics.
And
Hi.
Sydney?
I'm Sydney. I'm going to be a perspective tonight. I'm a sophomore and I'm a neurobiology major, hoping to go to med school after I graduate.
Okay, thank you. So everyone, during our hour together, there's going to be natural breaks in the flow that allow for questions and responses. So please feel free to type in the chat feature any questions or comments that you might have as we go along. Miranda is monitoring that feature and can alert us at the appropriate times. So I want to start off with the following comment. Thinking about Brain Week and thinking about Wisconsin, I was recently looking at Shakespeare plays, and a relevant skit idea occurred to me. So in one of Shakespeare's plays, Julius Caesar, there is a character, Antony. Now, Antony is a friend of Caesar, but Antony fears also being assassinated. So he claims allegiance to Brutus and the Senate conspirators after Caesar's death. But later, when speaking a funeral oration over Caesar's body, he persuades the audience to withdraw its support of Brutus and the Senate and instead condemn them as traitors. With tears on his cheeks and Caesar's will in his hand, Antony uses masterful rhetoric to change the crowd's opinion of the situation. So with that in mind, can you identify the relevance to the scene that we now join, in which three people are engaged in a conversation?
No one can deny that the consumption of alcohol in Wisconsin is prolific. It includes parents providing alcohol to their young teens. These traditions run deep in our Wisconsin communities, affecting our families and children in profound, long-lasting ways. This culture is dangerous and often left unopposed by parents and guardians who couldn't dare to challenge these norms, even if it be at the expense of their own children. This is how culture works. It is so deeply embedded and so easy to leave unquestioned that making change takes a lot of courage and commitment. For many, it is easier to try and justify their conformity with the norms, just as their own parents probably did. Take this typical parent, for example.
Hey, I drank when I was a teen. I turned out just fine. So why would I keep my kids from drinking?
I understand why you would think that. What is there to compare to if you've never seen your own brain? Can I ask what you consider as just fine?
Well, I don't have any major mental or health problems, and I've done well for myself and our family.
This may be true, but you really can't know the deficits that your brain has undergone without actually seeing them. What I do know is that In numerous studies looking at the brains of people with varying degrees of alcohol use, those that used alcohol actually in moderate to high levels throughout their lives had noticeable areas of brain matter loss in their scans. See these dark areas here? This shows emptiness in the brain. No brain matter or neurons, only the fluid that fills the cavity. Is that really the future you want for your children? By the way, Korsakoff syndrome is alcoholism-related damage to the brain and spinal cord, primarily affecting memory.
It can't be that bad, can it?
Well, just because my kids are drinking occasionally, that doesn't mean they're going to be an alcoholic like the people in these images you've just shown me. I would never let it get that bad.
While this may be true, do you really want to take your chances? In a study conducted by researchers for the American Journal of Psychiatry, it was shown that the earlier a person drinks in adolescence, the greater their chances of developing alcohol abuse disorders later in life, with the greatest prevalence being roughly 1 in 5 for kids who drank first at age 11. And in college-age kids, that number is still high at just above 1 in every 20. That's roughly 6%. Do you really want to risk that one being your child?
Can that really be true?
Well, okay, this is not going to happen to my kids. They are healthy. They are safe. We have a happy home.
Aside from greater risk of future alcohol use disorders, the further health and cognitive effects of drinking during adolescence are still undeniable. Cognitively, alcohol use at a young age decreases functioning in important and still developing areas like the amygdala, which deals with emotions, the hippocampus, which facilitates memory, and the prefrontal cortex, which has many functions, including decision-making and impulse control. Studies have shown a loss of gray matter, which means cell-to-cell neural connections that are simply being lost in these areas in adolescents that use alcohol. Cognitively, this results in impairments in emotional regulation, memory tasks, and important decision-making and critical thinking skills.
Yikes.
In the body, alcohol is a known carcinogen, increasing chances of all cancers, but especially cancers of the head and neck, the esophagus, the colon, the breasts, and the liver. In fact, according to the Wisconsin Cancer Collaborative, Wisconsin actually has higher rates of cancer than the national average, as of a study conducted just this past year. Additionally, this same study listed the primary causes of those cancers. Alcohol use was second only to obesity.
Double yikes. Well, either way, my kids tell me everything. They would never keep anything from me. So I can steer them in the right direction if I know something is going wrong.
Everything?
I think we lost perspective. Sydney, are you still on?
Yeah, I couldn't hear Kai, sorry.
Okay.
Okay. While this may be true, you must also know that parents rarely get the full story from their children. Whether it is that they don't want to share something they aren't proud of, fear of getting in trouble, or even just don't feel like talking about it, it is impossible for parents to know everything that their kids are doing at all times. In a study conducted on a number of families in Rochester, New York in 2006, it was found that parent-adolescent relationships with greater closeness and trust did yield higher levels of disclosure to parental figures and less secrecy, but This same study highlighted that in most cases, parents also overestimated the level of trust and disclosure that they were having with their kids. In other words, parents often assume that their children are sharing a bit more fully than they really are.
That is quite revealing.
Well, I drank as a teen. So did my parents and my grandparents. We all turned out okay. And that's the norm and all we've ever known. Why would I question that?
Well, of course, we're in Wisconsin. You and many other parents are asking yourselves the very same question. Wisconsin currently ranks third highest for adult alcohol consumption at 64.4%. And while this part of Wisconsin's culture creates a lot of false pride in its communities, it also has detrimental impacts on the state's health and wellness in both adolescents and adults. As I mentioned earlier, Wisconsin has higher rates of total cancer cases than the US average, with a second leading cause of Wisconsin cancers being related to binge drinking. Speaking to how the culture is affecting our youth, data collected by the National Center for Drug Abuse Statistics showed that Wisconsin had the third highest alcohol use rates among 12 to 17-year-olds. It was third only to Montana and Iowa. If this is the culture that you want to continue to perpetuate in your children, I think it would be important to reconsider who is really being harmed in these practices.
Well, how can we get our kids to understand this too?
Even if I decided not to allow my teens to drink, they're going to anyway. They're kids. Aren't I doing the right thing for them by providing a safe environment for them to learn and be able to be open about it? Not to mention, I can keep them from driving while impaired.
I can understand the good intentions behind this viewpoint. However, just because your teens are drinking under your roof and not elsewhere doesn't mean that the dangers and detriments of drinking just go away. That's the thing about the effects of alcohol on adolescent brains. The science is the same no matter whose roof it's under. Your kids and their friends are losing gray matter in key areas of emotional regulation and decision making. They're increasing their risks of cancer and increasing risk of alcohol dependence later in life, all in one place.
Still not convinced?
Look, you keep talking about statistics and chances. You don't know for sure that this is going to happen to my teens.
You're right. Not all of these statistics are 100%. But as parents, you put sunscreen on your kids, even though the risk of skin cancer is not 100% without it. You feed your kids healthy meals, even though they're not guaranteed to develop major conditions without them. You watch your kids by the pool and tell them not to run, even though they're not 100% guaranteed to fall or drown. There are things that you do every day as parents to help improve the quality of life and chances of success for your kids. So why should the topic of alcohol be considered any differently? As a parent, I think it's important to look from that perspective and decide for yourself, is the risk really worth it?
I ask you again, still not convinced?
Well, okay. I need to think about this. I am still skeptical, but I'm willing to consider what you have said. It's going to take some time for me to see whether I agree with your data and conclusions. You are one person with one viewpoint versus all the years and all the people that I have been living with for decades. And then you add in all the generations before us. That's a pretty big mountain to get over.
And scene. But this is not the end. Let's explore these topics further.
Yay! Well done, guys. So I hope you appreciated our skit and that you can see the relevance to what I think those of us that are involved in spreading information about the use of alcohol in Wisconsin and the potential dangers on our teens. And if we wish to spread a message, we do run into a lot of resistance. I can tell you that sometimes speaking at the high schools with the sophomore health classes, later that evening, parents that know me in the grocery store will come up and be agitated and want to have a conversation with me. So that, you get the idea of the genesis of our skit. So Miranda, was there anything in the chat that would be appropriate at this time before we go to the next part of our evening together?
Nope, just some accolades. That was an awesome skit.
I got to tell you, it's 100%. That was Sydney and Kai. They are phenomenal at what they do. So for the next part, what I'd like to do is I would like to show you some slides of information that is relevant and further develops the science, lots of which was just mentioned in the skit. So if I'm technically adequate, I am now going to share those slides. All right, Miranda, can you see my slide?
Looks great, Drew.
Okay, and can you see this giant pointer?
I can.
I love this thing. Good. Okay, so thinking about, we were just looking at and talking about some brain imaging, and I thought it relevant for us to understand that many groups now are not just taking snapshots of the brain, and frankly, what they can do with these brain imaging, the MRIs, is science fiction. They can take 13 different regions of the brain all at the same time, and that's science fiction to me that they can do this. But in particular, I know of one group that a while back was doing a lot of brain imaging on volunteers that we would call control healthy, non-addicted people. They also had access to people they categorized as abusers. So these would be people who are not addicts, but are definitely tending towards addiction based on their use. For instance, the binge drinkers, they would be the abusers. And they also had access to addicts, those that were coming in for treatment and those that were identified as recovered addicts. And the thing that I want you to realize is that, again, more than just taking snapshots of the brain, they do this. They say, okay, volunteer, as you're lying in the MRI machine, we're going to put a pad underneath your dominant hand. And as you're laying there and you can see the screen above you, you might see a letter. And if you see a letter on the screen, we want you to tap your finger as soon as you see that letter. Now, if there's a blank screen, a blank page, don't tap your finger. And they do this with you for a while. They'll show you a letter, you tap your finger. You show you a letter, they tap your finger. And you get good at it. You get trained pretty quick. And then they say, all right, volunteer, new rule. As you're laying there, if the letter is circled, don't tap. I want you to think about the cognitive load that puts on you. You just trained yourself. If you see a letter, tap your finger quickly, as quickly as you can. And now they're saying, oh, wait a minute. You must process, have a delay. Is that letter circled or not? And so here is a letter that might appear on the screen. And when you saw it, you would tap your finger. If it was the blank page to the right, you would not tap your finger. But every so often, they're going to throw that at you. Do you tap your finger, yes or no? And the whole time that they're doing this, they're measuring activity in the brain, lots of brain scans of all these different regions. For example, the sensory cortex areas that receive the visual information, they're looking for that to light up because you saw something. And then in the frontal cortex, where you give that sensory information meaning, it's a letter. It's a letter that's circled. They're measuring that. And when does that area of the brain get activated? And then a region called the cerebellum of your brain, which is very important for muscle coordination. If you're going to tap your finger, you got to coordinate the muscles of your arm and your hand. they're measuring all of this. They're measuring the activity, they're measuring when it lights up, they are measuring the interpretation, they're measuring the error rates. And what does it reveal? What they've published for me is really impactful. They've published that healthy brains, you can predict a pattern when you are looking at letters and making decisions about whether to tap your finger or not. And these patterns have distinct timing. There's milliseconds, thousandths of a second between. And there's a certain error rate that shows up, how often you inappropriately tap your finger for that circled letter. What they say now is that if you have a brain that's been bathed in an addictive substance like alcohol, you have a different brain pattern. There's a different pattern of delay, there's a different error rate. All of these things are different, to the point where, and this I'm not sure I totally believe, but they report at a live seminar that I went to, the technicians that read this data every day, they can walk into a room and on the table, the only thing on the table is brain data. And they can look at that, and with high degree of precision and accuracy, they can say, oh, that brain is a healthy brain. Okay, that brain is an addicted brain. Now this brain's a little confusing to me. Is this a recovering addict? With high degree proficiency, they can identify your brain data, just by looking at your reaction times, your error rates, when things light up and for how long they light up in your brain. For me, that's pretty revealing. That's no longer us as people saying, okay, these are addictive substances, they are bad for us. No, this is actual measurable things that you can collect and look at. I find that to be quite remarkable. So again, the message is there are definitive patterns of healthy brains. They are measurably different than the abusers and the addicts. And some of the changes of these brain patterns are reversible, and some not always. And that brings up the very controversial issue. If you are abusing a substance like alcohol and then you stop, will you go back to your original typical healthy state? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It's not guaranteed. And that's a controversial topic that we can talk more about if you'd like to. All right. Truly, what's going on? And this will be the last bit of neuroscience that I throw at you, I promise. What are we really talking about when we say brain patterns change? It is amazing to me that we can drill down to the cellular and molecular level in the lab and show you, this is what changed. We can measure this. So for example, on screen, there are 3 neurons, 1, 2, 3. These would be the neurons, the neuronal cells that are up in your brain. They are connected together in a circuit. And what's incredible is that we say they are connected, but there's actually no physical contact. There's no touching. Rather, the way they talk to each other, the way they're connected, is this neuron 1 has these 2 regions right here and right there. Those are called synapses. Those are physical gaps in space that neuron number 1 talks to neuron number 2 by the release of a chemical, a neurotransmitter. You may be familiar with these from advertisements when they talk about serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter, so it would be released from this region of neuron 1, it would diffuse across the space and talk to neuron 2. That's how neurons are connected in a circuit. And the thing is, if you talk about any addictive substance, whether it's alcohol or what are some more addictive substances? Cocaine, opioids, big opioid thing, cannabis, all of these addictive substances, they all affect right there the transmission of the neurotransmitter. All of the symptoms that you can ascribe. A person walks in and they are inebriated. We realize they're inebriated because of their symptoms, how they're behaving and what they're doing. All of that comes about because of an alteration at the synapse, an alteration of the neurotransmitter release. That's pretty measurable and pretty remarkable. But in this context, there are also long-term effects. And in particular, this is what's the problem most with the teens abusing alcohol. You see, the emerging picture is this. From the teen years, say 13, actually through 25 to be absolutely correct, but we'll say 21. For 13 through 21, their brain is rewiring. It doesn't get any bigger. That is as big as it's going to get when they were 8 or 9 years old. And that's because their skull is hard bones and that fused. So it doesn't get any bigger. But how it works gets more complicated and more intricate. So for example, one of the long-term predictions we could make, this communication down here between neuron 2 and neuron 3, right now, there are 3 points of contact. So neuron 2 can talk to neuron 3 at these 3 locations. If this communication was vital for the survival of the teen during their teen years, no one knows this. You can't feel it, you can't sense it, you don't know what's happening. This is going to come around and make a 4th contact, a 5th contact. It's going to increase the number of contacts, the neurosynapses, the amount of neurotransmitter chemical that's released from neuron 2 onto neuron 3. And that's because this is vital to the survival of the teen. Again, they don't know this is happening. Now, it's also true that some of the circuits, they're not so important for survival of the teen. So again, no way to sense this. You can't feel it, you can't sense it, you don't know what's happening. But day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, maybe instead of 1, 2, 3 points of contact between these 2 neurons, 2 of them get absorbed by the body. And now there's only 1 point of contact. And we call that pruning. And that's really important, to have the appropriate number of contacts between neurons in a circuit in order for your brain to work at its best, to work properly. And again, what I'm highlighting for you is that it's now measurable that addictive substances on the teen brain, they interfere with this rewiring, the strengthening of some communication, the pruning or weakening of others. That doesn't go as planned. And that's relevant to our skit. That is relevant to our brain imaging, in which we have them playing this game of tapping their finger or not, because we can start to measure the impact on their brain being rewired. So I hope that that wasn't over the top in terms of the neuroscience, but I think it's really important for us to have this knowledge so that when you are challenged by people, challenged by your teens, if you have the bravery and the ability to talk to your teens about their consumption of alcohol, and they say, yeah, but how do you know this? What's going on there? You can now, in a rational, logical way, give them some information. So that, I hope, is the case. I hope that that comes through. So I wanted to be sure to touch on, again, going from that imaging and from what's happening up in the brain, I wanted to touch on these couple of comments that frequently I get from my community where I live. And that is, so the first one, is it true that some families and members of that family just have alcoholism in the genes? It's genetic. You got the gene. There's nothing they can do about it. They are predetermined. They are destined for alcoholism and or drug abuse. Is that true? So I've been a scientist a long time, and you're going to get my opinion. My opinion is this: nothing about us is ever 100% nature, genetics. That is not the case. Nurture, the environment, that has a very important role. And I'm going to say it has an equally important role. Look, you can choose who you spend your time with. You can choose what you want to do with those people. That's not genetic. That's the environment. That's the situations you choose to put yourself in. So just because alcoholism runs in your family I can't deny that your predisposition might be higher, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be an alcoholic. You can choose what you do. You can choose how you live your life. You can choose how you deal with the stress of life and the problems that come your way. You are not predestined. Now, that's my opinion, again, based on the fact that nothing I have seen in my many decades of being a scientist, that anything is strictly nature and genetics. So that's my response when people bring that up. This one I get all the time. Perhaps you have heard this as well. What about the families in Europe and their permissiveness? You know, the people in Spain, those 15 and 16-year-old kids, they're having alcohol with mom and dad at the table. And that's a good thing. Those kids are learning how to drink responsibly. They're learning how to drink with maturity. Their culture better prepares their children to be adults. That sounds really good. It makes you want to agree with it, doesn't it? Then you start looking at the data. This is where our perspective character would come in. Say, you know, actually, it doesn't work quite like that. In all of the countries in Europe that have been now, data has been collected, the binge drinking that their teens do is higher than in the United States. Because the kids find out they like drinking that wine and that beer and that alcohol. And so the weekend comes, they binge, especially if they can get away with it if mom and dad aren't around. They have more health problems than we do that are alcohol related. They have more problems with their teens and problematic drinking than we do in the United States. So I would counter, this is a lovely idea. It doesn't work like that when you actually look at the data. It sounds good. And for some reason, we in the United States have this mystical, magical rainbow vision of Europe. It's not so mystical, magical, and it's not so rainbowish is what I would counter with, what I would say. All right, so I have one more thing I want to show you. Again, thinking about the lens of talking to people and encountering people in your community. And what does alcohol do to the teen brain? It was mentioned in our skit how it's demonstrably bad for memory formation. That loss of gray matter and memory in particular can be affected. Let me show you this. The neuroscience is quite clear. If you are studying, if you're trying to learn something, and you follow that with sleep, REM sleep, rapid eye movement, the deep sleep, then it is measurable. You get a molecular transformation in the hippocampus, you get consolidation, and you form memories. So to learn something, the best thing to do is to study it, go to sleep, particularly the REM sleep, and when you wake up, you will have memories formed. That's the molecular model, and again, quite demonstrable in all experimental models thus far. What if you tried to learn something and you followed it with alcohol? It turns out, we can measure this in the lab, at the molecular level, what you find is you don't get consolidation. You don't get a memory formed in the hippocampus. If you are studying and you're trying to learn something and remember it, if you follow that with drinking of alcohol, it turns out even just 1 or 2 drinks, you cannot make those memories. And if you do make the memories, they're very weak. So nothing has happened. You've wasted your time. And we share this with the undergrads. Sydney and Kai can attest to that. We share this with them because on campus, it's problematic when students say, we are going to be good students. We are at UW-Madison. We want to be good students. So we're going to go to the library. We're going to study for 4 or 5 hours. We're going to do our homework, write our papers, read whatever it is we need to do, fill out the various lab reports. We're doing all of that. But now, you know, it's 8, 9 o'clock in the evening on a Friday. I'm 21. See ya. I'm going to the bar. They are wasting their time. They are not learning anything. They are not remembering anything. So this is a message that we're trying to spread here on campus at UW-Madison. And I like it very much when the undergrads say, yeah, right, come on. How do you know this? How do you know that this is the case? You say you can show me this in the lab, but put your money where your mouth is. How can I say, look, I don't need to take you to the lab. I don't need to show you data. Everyone knows if you consume alcohol, if you consume enough of it, you have blackouts. You might have been the life of the party last night, but you don't know why. You don't remember anything. I don't have to take you to the lab. I can just take you out in the community and say, hey, anybody ever experience a blackout? How many people are going to say yes? This is alcohol to the point where you don't even remember those moment-to-moment life activities, but it's the same thing that I've shown to you above. There is no difference in a blackout versus the inability to remember something that you were trying to learn. It's the same thing. It's just a matter of dose, how much alcohol you actually consumed. So I always find that to be a very powerful message, a very powerful thing to have knowledge of and be able to talk about. Again, I think it's relevant to our skit. All right, now, Miranda, did that agitate any questions or comments in the chat?
Not as of yet.
Okay, I'm
I
going to take
am-
off my parent tag.
I will continue to monitor. I learned a lot, so I'm learning for sure.
Okay, I have a few more things and then we'll go to some question prompts for the people that are attending. What I wanted to share, again, thinking about community and the impact of alcohol and addictive substance on our brains. We encounter a lot of myths. And what can we say about those myths? So for example, myth or fact, alcohol makes you warmer. You know, why do those, I forget the breed of the dog, why do they have the little barrel with the brandy in it? Because alcohol makes you warmer. That's what you were told. And in fact, if you drink alcohol, and to be transparent, yes, I like to drink a glass of wine. I drink alcohol. I am not a hypocrite. I try to do it intelligently. If there is such a thing, that might be an oxymoron. I'm not sure. But I know, yeah, alcohol has a warming effect. But actually, this is a myth. What happens is when you drink the alcohol, the blood vessels nearest your skin, the periphery, they dilate. So more blood is sent to the surface of your body. That's the sense of warmth. About your head and your hands, you feel that warm blood from your core come into the surface. That's the sensation of warm. But folks, you're taking that warm blood from your core, you're actually dropping your core temperature. You're actually getting colder, and you don't even know it because all that nice warm blood is out here at the surface rather than being in your core. So in fact, this is particularly dangerous for a place like Wisconsin. Granted, this winter has been totally unusual. We had, 2 weeks of winter and then that was it. Wisconsin winters can be cold for a long period of time, and hypothermia is such a danger. So this one in particular, I am frequently sharing with the high school health classes as much as possible to really counter this myth. It does not make you warm. You feel warm, but in fact, you're getting cold. What about this myth? I remember this when lifetime ago when I was growing up. Drinking water and eating bread will make you sober faster. How many of us have encountered this? This is a myth. We want it to be true because, you drank the alcohol, so it was in your stomach. So now if I drink some water, that's going to dilute it. And if I eat some bread, well, that's doughy, so that can absorb the alcohol. So it makes sense. Yeah, this is what I should do. Folks, that's not the way this works. The water and the bread, they do not absorb, they do not dilute, they do not speed the removal of the alcohol from your body. Once the alcohol is in your body, the only way that alcohol is going to disappear and you're going to get sober is you have to wait for your liver to metabolize the alcohol, to break it down. And it does not matter how much water you drink nor how much bread you eat. You cannot change the rate that your liver metabolizes the alcohol. So this is also a myth. This myth, black coffee and a cold shower will make you sober faster. Again, I'm hoping that for some of you this resonates, that you've You've heard this, you've seen this on entertainment. You may have even encountered it in real life. This is a myth, absolutely. One of the most profound statements I ever heard, there was an addiction person given a seminar, and they literally said, do you know what you get when you take a drunk person and you give them black coffee and a cold shower? Do you know what you get? You get a cold, wide awake drunk. I shouldn't laugh, but that made me laugh. You get a cold, wet, wide awake drunk. Yes, you do. That's the only thing you get. The coffee, the caffeine makes you wide awake, still drunk. And actually, that's even more of a problem sometimes on campus now. And in some high school parties, they're mixing the caffeine drinks with the alcohol. That worries me a lot. Again, only time and liver metabolism will break down the alcohol to remove it. All people with alcohol use disorder drink every day. So this is a really important one, particularly given our community where we are encouraging families to discuss openly consumption of alcohol and discuss openly with their teen about the consumption of alcohol. So alcohol use disorder is how we refer to alcoholism now, that there's a trend towards alcohol use disorder. And I will be open with you. In my family, there is alcoholism. And I know of one person in particular because what did we do about it as a family? We always just dealt with it by pushing it to the side. That was that person, and we knew they were an alcoholic, and we just dealt with it by sequestering them off to the side. We never really did much for them that we should have done. I regret that. But as it turns out, there was another person in our family that was an alcoholic I didn't even know. Because to have alcohol use disorder, you might actually not drink every day. But there are certain moments at certain days where a trigger happens, and when that time arrives, you will not be able to resist the consumption of alcohol. That's alcohol use disorder. If you cannot control the consumption and it is so ingrained in you and regular, then yes, you have alcohol use disorder, so that you do not have to drink every day. That's an important consideration. Myth or fact? Oh, it is a myth. Alcoholic behaviors may vary. Those who drink daily, those who drink heavily on weekends, those who binge, that could be weeks, months, or years apart, but it's still alcohol use disorder. The measure of it is not when or how often one drinks, but whether or not one can control the drinking once it begins. So I hope that's clear. I hope we made that point. And the last one, again, relevant to our skit. How often parents might have this opinion. You know what? We have to learn how to drink. We have to learn how to hold our liquor. That might be a message, that might be something that's in the community culture of Wisconsin. And in fact, this is a myth. Alcohol tolerance, it's not something you learn. It's something that you develop physiologically with your liver. Your liver has to increase its ability to break down the alcohol that you are consuming at increasing amounts. And so with chronic use, the liver must spend more time dealing with the alcohol than dealing with your physiology. This results to the damage to the liver. It can also damage your kidneys. I hope we made the point that the brain suffers, and your heart as well. When people have a higher tolerance, they have a higher likelihood to develop alcohol use disorder. Think about this, everyone. If you have a teen brain that's rewiring itself, you have some circuits that are being strengthened, some circuits that are being weakened. If that's happening in the presence of an addictive substance like alcohol, then that brain only works when the alcohol is present. Take away the alcohol, that brain's not wired to work without it. And the more you drink as a teen and your tolerance goes up, the more you impair the development of the brain. So this really, I think, impacts the people who are the teens and relevant to our skit. The numbers are clear from the epidemiological studies. If you binge drink a lot of alcohol before the age of 25, the likelihood of you being an addict later in life into your 30s goes way up. And there's measurable brain impairment. I hope we've made that point clear. It's the last thing I'll say, and then we'll go to some prompts. The legal drinking age is 21. The actual age that the science said it should be was 25. At 25, the brain is truly done cooking. It's truly done developing at 25. Folks, this is why you can ask yourself, what age can you rent a car? 25. The car rental companies, they looked at the actuarial tables from the insurance companies and realized, oh yeah, at 25, you stop being an idiot. We can trust you with our car now. But everyone realized 25 was not a viable option for as a legal drinking age. That was never going to be enforceable. That was never going to happen. And so they compromised at 21. They said, you know, we're pretty confident that at 21, most brains are mostly done. They're not all the way done cooking, but most brains are mostly done. So the age of 21 as the legal drinking age was a compromise. And I think that's relevant. Okay, I am going to stop talking. I apologize for dominating for the past while. Are there any questions or comments in the chat yet?
Dr. Drew, just one question, comment. What about drinking water or eating bread before you go out to drink?
Well done. Okay, really glad you asked this point. Bread is mostly carbohydrate. And in fact, your stomach and intestine are really good and efficient at breaking down the carbohydrate bread rapidly. So the amount of time that the bread is in your stomach and your intestine is really short. So even if you were to eat it ahead of time, that's not going to do much in terms of slowing down the absorption of alcohol and slowing down the inebriation. No, that's not going to work. What does work? People who have the, what's it called? Not the entertainment industry. When you have a bar or a restaurant, what's that called? That's an industry. That's a, I can't remember. Whatever that industry is called, they're pretty smart about it. Have you noticed that bar foods tend to be very greasy, deep fried, lots of deep fried stuff, lots of oily stuff? That's brilliant, because if you have greasy food, oily food with your alcohol, it is very difficult for your stomach and your intestine to break down fat or fatty food, oily food. So now that alcohol is going to stay longer in the stomach and not get absorbed as faster. So you can drink more. So in fact, this is why you should never drink on an empty stomach. If you drink on an empty stomach, boom, you're going to spike your blood alcohol right quick. If, however, you have some of that pizza with extra cheese, because we're in Wisconsin and lots of good cheese, now you know, now you're not going to spike your blood alcohol. So fatty foods, greasy, oily bar foods, that's what you should eat, not bread. Great question. Any others?
Not currently. Teresa let us know that she thought maybe hospitality industry was what you were looking for.
Yes. Thank you, Teresa. Oh, my brain is tired. So yes, that's what I was looking for, exactly. Okay, what I'd like to do, our Perspective Sydney has some prompts that it's 20 after, so we want to be respectful of people's time. What I'd like you to do, Sydney, is I would like you to talk through some of these bullets that we agreed on and just pose them as questions for everyone to consider. And after each one, if you would just pause a moment in case something strikes someone and they want to type in the chat. And that's how we can finish out our time together this evening.
Okay, sounds great. So now that the plan presentation has concluded, we as an organization wanted to open up the discussion to our audience members who are part of our Wisconsin community. So the first prompt is we would first like to know how the science from today's skit resonated with your own experiences, viewpoints. How can we get closer to our goal of reducing teen alcohol consumption? Or was there any one fact that really stuck with you?
So if that in any way makes you feel something, if you want to type that in the chat.
Okay. If there's nothing in the chat, I'll move on to the next one, just another thinking point. We next want to hear, oh, Mary,
Sorry about that. I missed something
no
here.
worries.
The first image of the brain threw me off right away. The presence of of empty space.
Remarkable, isn't it? You want to convince someone that, this thing happening up in our brain that no one can sense. You can see it, the empty space that develops. That's remarkable to me. Very impactful.
And Tim wrote, as a health teacher, this is something we don't cover in our curriculum.
Ooh. So, Tim, we would love to meet with you and talk to you more. We've tried, personally, I've been involved now with Oregon High School, Stoughton, and Lodi. And over the years, we've tried different approaches. So I have some really good ideas of things that have resonated with the sophomores and getting them to look into the matter in an authentic way. So I would be glad to, at some point, talk with you more about that.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to
Oh,
the
we have
next point,
there's
unless
one
there's someone
more.
in the, okay.
Okay. Teresa says, the skit was right on. Hear those points often as I'm sorry. As I keep my teen daughter from drinking until her mid-20s. Heard most of those things as a lifetime Wisconsinite, and I can totally agree with that.
It's a well ingrained culture, and I'm not advocating that we all have to be abstinent. That also doesn't work. We know that. There just has to be more information. There has to be more intelligent thought and discussion about the consumption of alcohol, especially when it comes to teens. That's what we're advocating.
Okay, so next we want to hear from you all why this science is important or should be important to your own broader communities. So just what you guys are thinking, what the importance is to you.
We actually might have heard that already in those earlier chats just a moment or two ago. That's, yep. I think that really was, and if anybody has anything further to say, please do. But I think very much what you are saying gets to that issue of, in the end, it's a matter of science, and we are developing as a race, as a human being. We are developing our knowledge. And I find it very troubling that as we get more information and more knowledge, we intentionally ignore it. Why do we do that? I don't get it.
So comment in the chat. For me, it's new. The more information, the better. And I wish we could change the culture quicker. I wish people would listen to the science.
Amen.
I think so often the message is just don't drink. But I think it is more powerful to share the science.
100%. Well said. Exactly. I cannot agree more. When people have this opinion and they come at you, we need to be perspective. We need to be Sydney. We need to have cogent thoughts and information. And that's hard to do sometimes. look, how many people, how many parents in our community, they've got jobs. They get home, they have to get dinner on the table. They have to get the dishes done. They have to get the homework going. And now you're telling me I got to learn all this science? I would say this to everyone. It is hard to be a parent these days. I can remember, how many of us remember our parents? Well, you just wait till you have kids. I can't wait to see what it's like for you. How many of us had that wish put on us by our parents? You know, I don't think our parents envisioned in any way what it's like to be a parent now and the challenges that we face as a parent. This is hard. And so we need to come up with ways to share the science with ourselves and amongst ourselves in order to spread it. Ooh.
One more thing. Do you have a summary of talking points for when talking to our kids about this?
Excellent point. And actually we could end with this. We're almost at time. So everyone, if I understand correctly, everyone that's here is spread throughout an area. It's not all just localized in one area. So in our area, we are part of various coalitions, and I'm part of the Oregon Cares Coalition. And on our website, we have created very distinct links and paths. We've gotten lots of advice about where to put links, and if you're a parent and you would like some talking points and how should you talk to your kids about this, it's very well laid out how to find that and how to use it. I will tell you, I am not so very good with technology, and so I'm the curmudgeon of the group. I'm always, I can't use this. I go to this website and I can't find anything. So they're always appeasing me. And so look, if I can navigate it, I think most people can. My point is this: it's not just the Oregon Cares Coalition, but there are coalitions throughout. I think one person was from Belleville. Teresa, you're from the Belleville area coalition. You might as well have resources. So everyone, what I would say is you could go to the Oregon Cares Coalition for sure, but you could also maybe visit the coalition that is more local to you to get those. Yes, I see Teresa type, we do have resources. So my response is there are resources, and lots of coalitions have spent good amount of time organizing the information to do exactly what you are asking, and you should have access to it. And look, to be honest, we are so responsive. If any coalition ever hears that a parent couldn't navigate, couldn't find those resources, we're gonna change things in a hurry to make it navigatable. And I think that might be unless there's anything else pressing, that might be a great place to stop, Miranda.
That's great. And I put the Oregon Area Cares website link in the chat. With that, we want to thank Dr. Drew and Sydney and Kai so much for the presentation. We wish everybody a great night and happy Brain Week.
Yes, thank you, Miranda, for doing this. Big thank you to